Here we are with an AccuCut crosscut unit saw with the fully auto options. We are going to show you both how to operate it and as well as some of the general functionality of the crosscut unit saws. So we have 2 units simulated loaded onto the carriage over here that are simply just 2 pallets that are supported by some 4x4 aluminum dunnage. What we are going to do is go ahead and manually bring that in using it in the control mode of manual. What we're going to do is I'm going to bring this in until the first cut is ready to go. And the first cut will be on where the laser is shown, which will be pretty obvious when I come down here. So as I'm bringing this down, I'm just going to actually slow it down once it gets close with the speed control, watching this as it comes in, and just drop the speed control off to 0, and then I can then bring the joystick back to 0. That way, right now I'm at roughly about a 2-inch in trim for the leading cut, and now I'm going to show you how to program the cut list. So right now I have a cut list of only 1 cut per pack, which is with the incoming units, and I'm going to want to change that. So under the cut list, here is where you can program a new recipe that I'm going to cycle through the current recipes to find out if I had a good one to use. And you can see that I didn't have a good one that I wanted to use, so I'm going to go ahead and rename a new one. The numerator is 5 for that one. I'm just going to rename it. You can rename the description however you want. I just wrote FIV for 5. I'm going to change the first to an 18-inch cut, and then I'm just going to show you a quick 12-inch cut. So again, we're at an 18-inch cut and a 12-inch cut out of this 48 inches of which will be fine. And what I'm going to do is save that file, which is that recipe, and you can see the active cut list is still on the first one. If I click that activate cut list, it's going to change the active cut list to that what we just created. Going back to the main screen, you can see that now we are indeed activating we're going to be cutting number 5, as well as the in trim is enabled. So if that was disabled, you can see that it's going to not do an immediate in trim. So if you did that, you would have your laser set where the leading in trim was. It's not going to do a leading in trim, and it's just going to zero it out, move it 18 inches and cut. I want a leading in trim, so I'm going to go ahead and select that option. So wherever I have this laser, when I hit go, it's going to do a leading in trim. It's going to move 18 inches, do another in trim, and it's going to move another 12 inches and do the second cut was actually a internal cut, and the final would be an in trim. So that's what's going to work. I'm going to again check for all of our safety was reset. I'm going to change the manual control to auto and simply press the button here. Technically you can actually use the button up here on the screen to say auto go, but I like to use the button so that you don't wear out your touch screen. So again, pressing the button is going to start. Oh, nothing's going to start because I don't have the hydraulic pump turned on. So turning that on in order to then, the hydraulic pump needs to be on in order for everything to run, because it's going to use the hydraulics during the so what you heard here is the saw bar is moving down at roughly 20% speed because it's set here. The saw bar chain is running. This obviously is a sample bar because you'd have your take-up unit and all that in the chain running right now, but we don't in this demo. So we're going to pull the cord that we have set up on the floor that's actually activating the switch on the bottom that's telling us that it cut all the way through, so that you're not here for 10 minutes. So again, once it went all the way up, it's going to change the position. It's going to go ever so slowly into 18. Once it becomes within 5/1000ths of an inch within 18, it's going to reset the position. It's going to start the motor again, bring it down, cut that. What he didn't see was after the cut, go ahead and stop it, it's actually going to raise the lift arms, which will in this case actually separate the 2 pieces of the 2 cut units to prevent any kerf collapse from pinching the blade. That's when the blade then moved all the way up. We're going to move to our second position, which was only 12 inches. Once it hits the 12 inches, we're going to go ahead and fire up the chain motor. It's going to start the chain. We're going to come down. We're making our third cut. We're stopping it prematurely so that we can speed this up. it raises the lift arms up one more time to prevent any curve collapse. It goes up at a faster speed. Now is when we're going to search for the second unit. So in the bottom, there is between the two 10 by 10 columns, there's a through beam sensor that detects the leading edge. It will then back up ever so slowly. Once it falls off that edge, it knows, okay, that's where I am. And then given the current offset that we use between that through beam sensor and where the cut line is, then it moves that 9 inches or so in order for it to then have the first cut at roughly that same spot that we did the leading in trim. So it's going to do the leading in trim one more time. We'll go ahead and, we'll go ahead and stop it prematurely. You're going to see that the position's going to then, after it raises all the way up, we're going to then go to our first cut, because it's on a new recipe. It's going to move to the 18 inches within 5/1000 of an inch. Reset it. It's going to then start our cut. We can stop it prematurely. It's going to raise the lift arms, opening up that curve so that the bar can go back up. It's going to move to our second cut position. Back down to the 12 inches. Once it hits and stops at 12 inches, then makes the cut. And during these cuts, there is feedback on the bar and chain amps, which can be shown here. And making sure that the bar never goes above the amperage will actually slow down the bar speed in order to prevent too much force on the bar. So after the 2 recipes, or however many packs that you do, it's going to send the carriage out to the outfeed. Once the carriage hits the end sensors, it's going to slow down. Once it hits the first sensor, it's going to slow down. The second sensor will stop it. The third sensor is like an e-stop in case something happened. The lift arms are now going to lift up. It's going to lift the units off of the carriage with the dunnage sticking out past it. Now the carriage is below the dunnage, so the carriage can now travel all the way under, and it's going real slow right now until the encoder is engaged. Once the encoder is engaged, we don't want to hit the encoder at full speed, or it's going to slowly hurt the encoder. And so it creeps into the encoder. Once the encoder is engaged, it can then speed up, and it will send the carriage all the way to the infeed, such that right now, if the forklift could be unloading our units, or the forklift could be waiting over here on the infeed side with a unit ready to load. That's the most efficient way of doing it, is having the forklift ready to load the carriage, so that as soon as it stops, he throws 4x4 dunnage on the carriage, pushes the units up against the backstop to square the units, loads the units, and once those units are loaded, we can actually start the process again. We can start those leading end trims while these are still over here. As long as these now that they're down, the carriage can bring in and we can start cutting. As long as we don't run into this pallet here before it gets unloaded, we can do a lot of processing in the middle here while the forklift is unloading the pallets and removing the dunnage off of the lift arms. So that's pretty much the process of, as soon as that carriage is empty, load it and start operating it, and just make sure that you have unloaded this before the carriage needs to go to this position here. So that is our crosscut unit saw and the process that it is used to create a recipe and run the recipe, in this case with the multi-unit cutting. The one thing that we don't have on this saw as a demonstration is the remote control cutting. The one thing that would do would be the forklift operator, after they load it, if the recipe was already created, they can simply click a remote button from the forklift in order for the entire unit to come in, use that leading edge sensor in order to make the first cut. So someone could, if you're doing repeat cut lists, you could technically actually operate this saw completely from the forklift without having to come up here on the operator platform. And that is the fully auto options of our crosscut unit saw.